So, today we talk with Sue, who is the author of The Space Between. We talk about a couple of triggering topics such as rape, suicide, and eating disorders. If that is something that may trigger you, I don't recommend listening. But if this is the conversation that you do want to listen to and gain some value from, then I recommend, of course, listening on, and I hope you enjoy. Hey y'all, welcome back to Mentally a Badass. My name is Justine and I have today, her name is Sue. So she is going to talk about her story, like what happened to her as a child, some of the trauma that she went through. She is also doing so much to help break the stigma. She is an author. She also does, I see she speaks at conferences. And then she's also a life coach, which is really cool. And I'm so excited to talk about that. So Sue, thanks again for being on here.
Thanks for having me, Justine. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, awesome. So if you just want to start talking about your story, such as I believe you mentioned that you were raped as a child. Is that correct?
Yeah, and before I start, let me give a
Mhm.
quick trigger warning because
Okay.
some of the things that we're going to get into can be triggering for others. So I always want to give a trigger warning. Just
Hmm.
we're going to talk about eating disorders. We're going to talk about sexual assault. So if any
Hmm.
of those issues are triggering for the listener, I want to give you the heads up now. Give you a minute to either come up with a self-care plan. If you have to turn the recording off and turn the show off now for now and come back later when you're prepared, that's fine too. But I always want to give that as a heads up and everything, because I don't want to be a trigger for anybody else. So
Yeah.
having said that, yeah, my story starts when I was in first grade. I was 7 years old, and a classmate enticed me into the woods on the school grounds and raped me. And Bobby
Oh,
held me
goodness.
against my will for 45 minutes. And I didn't know the power his last words to me were going to have. And he went out the one side and said, "Don't tell anybody." And again, I didn't know how that was going to hold me captive, but it ended up becoming a 15-year secret for me because I didn't tell anyone until my senior year of college. So by then, my emotions were frozen in time that day. And the way
Hmm.
I phrase it is that the longer you're in the freezer, the thicker the ice gets. Think of
Yeah.
something you find. Think of something you find that's shoved in the back of your back corner of your freezer for a year, and how thick that frost is. Well, that's what it
Yeah.
was like for my emotions, and I had to. Trying to even explain when it came out in a conversation with my dean of students in college. It wasn't expected. I didn't know
Hmm.
it wanted to come out. But here's the thing: when there is unresolved trauma in our lives, it
Hmm.
will find a way out because
Hmm.
it wants to be heard, it
Hmm.
needs to be heard, and it wants to be healed. And
Yeah.
for me, up until I opened up about it, it was coming out in self destructive ways. I
Hmm.
developed an eating disorder. I've
Hmm.
dealt with depression and anxiety. I've been suicidal twice. I
Hmm.
was a messed up high schooler. I was a
Hmm.
messed up college kid. And I got my value from being seen. So I
Hmm.
stayed busy because
Hmm.
if I was seen, I had value. And if I was seen, if I stayed busy, I didn't have to think. And if I didn't have to think, I didn't have to feel. And if I
Hmm.
didn't have to feel, I didn't have to deal with my stuff.
Hmm.
So activity became my number. And I was
Yeah.
over involved, and it made it look really good. Like, Sue's got it together, and Sue's this
Hmm.
campus leader, and all this stuff. And I was dying on the inside by the time I got to college. And it all came to a head in the dining hall one day. And I sat by myself a lot. I was in a sorority my junior and senior years, but I ended up just sitting by myself a lot. And I was
Hmm.
very insecure. And I had, by this time, people had the persona that, Sue was, and I wanted people to believe that Sue had it all together, and Sue was didn't have any issues. Sue was good.
Hmm.
So my brain was warped out by this time, and a very natural human response of being hungry for
Hmm.
me became another trauma, because I would have enjoyed another helping of food, another serving. But my
Mhm.
brain was so warped out. My self talk was so far off the charts that I was telling myself instead that I can't go get food because people are going to know Sue has a need. And God forbid Sue have a need, because then Sue's going to be found out that she's really not the person she's made everybody else to believe. So I learned to shut off my hunger. And instead of going up for another serving of food, I dumped my tray and got out of Dodge. And I'd go back to my room and I'd snack instead. I learned to shut off my hunger. So
Mhm.
I didn't even really call it. I would tell people I had odd eating behaviors or
Mhm.
anorexic tendencies, but I never called it an eating disorder until my counselor nailed me on it in 2016. That's getting a little ahead of myself. So all this is going on, and I didn't deal with the rape until 2014, which
Mhm.
sounds crazy. It happened when I was 7 years old. I didn't tell anyone until I was 22. And then by the time 2014 rolls around, you're talking almost 40 years since the event. And I'm finally starting to deal with it and address it with my counselor. And that was the most gut wrenching year for me
Mhm.
because I had to own my story.
Mhm.
Because I was in denial about my story. I didn't like my story. So I figured if I denied it, maybe it made it go away. And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it does not work that way. So when I finally started dealing with it with my counselor, it stirred up all these emotions that were frozen in time. They all came to life. And emotions are not a friend of someone with an eating disorder. So it became a tornado in my mind because I was dealing with something that I had tried to push aside for now 4 decades.
Mhm.
And then all the emotions that I was trying to deny all this time were coming to life as well. And I didn't know how to handle them in a proactive way, in a healthy way.
Mhm.
And that's when I started dabbling with cutting because I
Mhm.
needed some relief for the anguish in my heart that was trying to get out. And I
Mhm.
didn't know any healthy way to deal with
Mhm.
that. So, I've kind of run the gamut of things, but I stand here now on the other side of the healing mountain.
Mhm.
When I speak, I tell people that there is no way around the healing mountain. You have to go through it.
Mhm.
But the joy and the peace on the other side, now that I'm on the other side, I can tell you it's worth it. But it also helps me fully understand and relate very well to people who are just starting to make the dig. But
Mhm.
I want to be that voice of hope for them to
Mhm.
help them dig all the way through.
Yeah, I think that's a really amazing and inspiring story to hear. When you first started talking about in the beginning about how you got raped in first grade, it just kind of doesn't really process in my mind. Like, how can you said a person in your class, so this other person was 7 years old as well?
Yep.
So I'm trying to think, just like me thinking human wise and just sexual and such, like, I I mean, this is me just like wondering, like, do first graders, I don't really even feel like that type of, you know what I mean, like sexual urge, if that makes sense. So it's just kind of interesting how a 7-year old did that. That's insane.
Right. And for the longest time, and what I'm about to say may anger some people
Mm-hmm.
and it may totally shock them and confuse them.
Yeah.
And I think others will understand. It is, I'm at this point now. It did not get there easily. It
Mm-hmm.
did not get there overnight. And it was painful getting to this point because it meant I had a whole lot of work I had to do on me.
Yeah.
But I am to the point now where I actually feel compassion for my rapist. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is exactly what you just said. At seven in the 70s, rape was not on the radar. It was not something talked about. It
Yeah.
was safe to walk to school alone. It was just all the neighborhood kids walked to school. We lived about half, 3/4 of a mile. all of us walked alone, walked to school. You saw the sidewalks were just full of kids walking. It was
Mm-hmm.
normal. So here's the thing. If it wasn't on the radar for me as a 7-year-old and it was not a topic of conversation, what was Bobby exposed to, or I hope not experiencing,
Yeah.
that exposed him to it?
Yeah. Do you feel that what happened to you made it hard for you for like any, future relationships that you had, like romantically?
Yeah, yeah. I was off and on with the same guy in high school, and
Hmm.
and Gary has since passed away. But we were able to talk about it at our 25th reunion, I think it was. We had a chance to talk about it and actually apologize to each other because we both admitted we were insecure and we used each other for that social security to
Yeah.
again to be seen at the high school dances, to have that
Hmm.
that person you can hold hands with in the hall, that kind of
Hmm.
thing. And we were both insecure. So I'm thankful we had a chance to have that conversation and and just be able to kind of clear the air about it.
Yeah.
He passed away I think about 5-6 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, but I was thankful. I'm really thankful that we were able to have that conversation.
Yeah. And this is, you said, the person that you were on and off with, is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. So this person that was your rapist, like, how was like I can't even imagine like having to see because in first grade like the classroom is like usually smaller, at least for me when I was in first grade. So I honestly like how did you get through that? You know what I mean? Like after he did that, and like how did you manage to like show up to class every day and have to see his face?
That's a good question that no one has ever asked me, and I'm not sure I know the answer because I don't remember a lot of it. I
Yeah.
don't remember a lot of
Makes sense.
time after that. Um,
Hmm.
you know, again, I actually I was going through stuff probably about a couple months ago, and I found my first grade class picture,
Hmm.
and I saw one blonde-haired little boy. I'm thinking that is Bobby. How it got through that, I don't know. I honestly don't know. Um, Now, probably only by the grace of God. But
Yeah.
and again, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I haven't.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I definitely understand if it was a very long time, it's very hard to kind of like think back and how you felt during that time frame. And like I said, I can't even like think like what even goes through that kid's head, when it comes to thinking like that. And honestly, there's a chance like he could have learned it at home,
Right.
and it's just I was also reading that you there in one of your book in your book there was a title that said, oh, I had it right in front of me, but I think it had to do with like people, like people hurt people. I forgot what it said. It was a chapter, I think.
It's the very first line of the book, and it says they were hurt people hurting their kids.
Yeah, and like that is, I'm a big believer that it's like hurt people. Like
Hmm.
it's just a very toxic cycle,
Right.
and honestly, like it's so unfortunate about what happened to you, and it's just crazy how that was like the way your metaphor was saying, I like with the whole ice and such, like the way I mean it's the same concept, but for me it's like when you have a secret that you hold for so long, it gets heavier each like as
Hmm.
time goes on, which is pretty
Yep.
much the same thing that you said.
Yep.
And I like honestly like truly believe that I like once I like talk about my trauma and like be open about it, like that's when I feel better, and then like it helps people, which you are doing. When did you start like basically deciding like, hey, I want to help other people and start doing what like your book and the conferences that you do, like when did you decide to start doing that?
That probably started. I think about 20. The book started in 2015, and to give a
Hmm.
little backstory,
Hmm.
in the whole healing part. that had to happen before the book could happen, before the speaking could happen,
Mhm.
started as a result of a movie. There's a movie that came out in 2014 called A Ragamuffin, and it's
Mhm.
based on the life of the late Rich Mullins, a big Christian musician. And it talks about relationships with your parents and the reckless love of God and reckless abandon in your faith and the masks that we wear. And I'm not
Mhm.
talking COVID masks. I'm talking the yeah, I know. I'm
I know
not.
what you mean.
I'm talking about the masks that we wear to make other people think we are someone we are not. The masks that we wear based on insecurity. So it's the movie talks about all that. And later in the year, the movie producer and the family and friends of Rich who were involved in the movie decided to do a retreat based on the themes of the movie. And I attended that retreat. And I went into that retreat imploding. It was when we were dealing with the rape. It was 2014. We were dealing with the rape, and I was a mess. And I
Mhm.
went in calling myself the holy exception, believing
Mhm.
that, telling myself that everything in the Bible was good enough for everybody else but me. I was too
Mhm.
screwed up, too far gone. I was a waste of time, and God couldn't use me.
Oh
And
goodness.
one of the team members has since told me that me going to that retreat was kind of like a Hail Mary to
Yeah.
dare to take that step of wondering, could God really love me, and could his kids really, was I lovable after
Mhm.
everything that damaged me? Was I
Mhm.
lovable? Because I didn't think I was. And I left
Yeah.
that retreat 3 days later saying and starting to believe for the first time that Jesus Christ is absolutely crazy about me, and he not
Mhm.
only loves me, he likes me. And there's
Yeah.
a big difference there. And that started the whole process of starting to heal. So how the book and the speaking came about started there, because then the next year I started writing the book. Because I
Mhm.
started when it started out with one concept and kind of took a different turn to become more of my story. And at first it kind of became cathartic, and
Mhm.
just starting to share some of the stuff that I was starting to process through my brain. And then
Yeah.
as I healed, the book took on a different turn. But then from that, what also started happening was that I went into recovery from an eating disorder in 2016. And
Mhm.
Thanksgiving and that was the hard year because we're dealing with the rape, we're dealing with the emotions, and then I go into recovery for eating disorder, and now I have to start making have to start eating, and food's been my enemy. So I have
Mhm.
all this going on. And Thanksgiving that year was really hard. And I
Mhm.
found myself struggling here, but I'm also part of an online community called Beating Eating Disorders. And I
Mhm.
was on there and I found myself encouraging others. And
Yeah.
then I started realizing, it's this, my company name is My Step Ahead. And the slogan line is, you only have to be a step ahead to help the person
Mhm.
behind you. And so
100%.
as I started helping others, then an opportunity came up to speak at a local high school at their health class and talk about eating disorders. And they were doing that unit on eating disorders. And that
Mhm.
has maintained. And then I started speaking at state level conferences for Ohio College Personnel Association. And now, last year and this year, I'm presenting at a virtual, an online national conference called the Annual Conference on Advancing School Mental Health, and that's
Mhm.
hosted by the College of Medicine from University of Maryland. So there have been so many opportunities since, to speak at campuses and high school classes and conferences and do a whole lot of podcasts. And I'm a life
Mhm.
coach now, and I've got the book out. So there's been a whole lot of things that have happened, but it all started because I dared to trust and take the risk and pick up the phone and ask for help.
Yeah. And that's definitely the first step. Well, the first step is to realize, okay, there's something that's wrong. And then second's like, okay, I need help. And then,
Hmm.
doing that reach out and getting that help. And then once you work on yourself and go to therapy and, be treated for what, is going on up, in your head and such, and being relieved from that, that trauma that you've been holding on for all these decades, then you decide, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to help break the stigma
Hmm.
because there's still a huge stigma around mental health. And
Right.
I feel that, it's being talked about more,
Hmm.
especially like, with COVID, people who were very lucky that didn't have to struggle, with their mental health, started struggling with their mental health because of COVID. Then they had
Right.
to like stay home, and they started turning lonely and started getting anxiety and depression. Then
Hmm.
they started feeling it and started understanding, like, oh wow, this is what the unlucky people who got traumatized as a child, and like this is what they feel, and now it's being more spoken about
Hmm.
on, like, social media and just overall. But there's still some people out there who still don't get it, which is super unfortunate, that people like don't understand that. I'm a big believer that your brain is everything. If you're not taking care of your brain, everything else just falls apart. And because, like, think about it, like, your personality goes from there. You're also, even physically, like, if people don't have good mental health, they're more likely to also have bad physical health, which is another thing.
Right. And for me, that's where the eating disorder came in
Mhm.
because I was not giving my body what it needed. And I'm going to get on a
Yeah.
soapbox here for a minute
Mhm.
because some of the dieting is pre-eating disorder behavior because it's based on
Mhm.
restriction. And
Yeah.
and and I know, eating disorders are biologically based mental
Mhm.
health issue. They are
Mhm.
also one of the deadliest of mental health struggles.
Yeah.
I believe they're number two behind opioid addiction, not only
Mhm.
because of the damage you do to your body, but also because of the suicide associated with the anxiety and the depression that comes with it. And a
Mhm.
lot of, and I'm not saying all of it, but there is a biological base because you're, the only way to put it for me is fats are the only thing that give you the sensation of being full. Protein is
Mhm.
the only thing that will rebuild your body strength and your muscle, and
Mhm.
carbs are the only thing that will give your brain energy. So
Interesting.
our body is designed to need all three of them. So when we
Right.
go on a low carb diet or keto or low fat or whatever else,
Yeah.
we are denying our body what it is designed to need. So therefore, we are already setting our body up to not function in its optimum capability. And
Right.
instead, learning to eat in a balanced setting of all three nutrient groups,
Mhm.
the macronutrients, eating a balanced ongoing, consistent balance. And
Mhm.
yes, that means starting to look at serving sizes on a label. And that means starting to make sure that you're getting that balance.
Mhm.
So when we're denying our body carbs, we're denying our brain energy. So what I ended up doing when I first started with my dietitian and having to learn to eat, and that sounds weird, but when you've been snacking and not giving your body what it needs, you have to
Mhm.
relearn. Everything I just said is what I had to learn. And
Yeah.
I've learned it now where it's becoming more intuitive. But I still remember the day at the office when I was getting some food. And for me, one of my red flags when I know my eating disorder is trying to talk to me too much is when I look in the fridge and I get overwhelmed and I can't make a food choice and I just shut the door. I'm like, screw it, I'll just snack. That's a huge
Mhm.
red flag for me. And I found myself getting ready to do that at work one day. And I remember saying, Ed, shut up. One of the
Mhm.
things we learned that I've learned with my dietitian is when we give our eating disorder a name, it helps
Mhm.
separate it from us. I am not my eating disorder. So
Mhm.
I named my eating disorder Ed. And I would, and not real loud for others to hear, but I would say literally out loud, sitting at the little kitchenette at work, I'm like, Ed, shut up. And I did, and then but then it wasn't enough for that. Then I had to make the exact opposite choice of what Ed was telling me to do.
Mhm.
And that's the general rule of recovery with an eating disorder. Do whatever the opposite is of your eating disorder is telling you to do. Whatever it's telling you to do the opposite. But it's hard. So anyway, but I'm standing there, and one day my brain just started. It's like it separated.
Mhm.
It's like the fog just started to clear, and I remember the day where my brain started thinking more clearly because it was getting consistently what it needed.
Mhm.
Now, that also meant as I first started in recovery, and my body had to learn to trust me because
Mhm.
I had not been treating it well for decades.
Mhm.
So when I started giving it the proper nutrients that it needed, yes, I my body kind of hoarded onto that a little bit. It stored a little extra fat. And I
Mhm.
remember dealing with my dietitian, like, I'm feeling pudgy in the middle here. I'm not liking this, you know? And then and we worked through it though. Because
Yeah.
what happened is because my body was getting what it needed, so it was latching onto it when it had it.
Right.
Because it didn't know how long it was going to have it. So
Yeah.
when my body reacted that way and I saw a response to it, at the same time, the more I stuck with it and was consistent with it,
Mhm.
then that leveled off because my body learned to trust me. So when
Mhm.
people go on diets and they say, "Oh, I got this great response," you know, and then a month later, man, it came back. Yeah, because your body doesn't
Yeah.
trust you
Yeah.
because you've proven to your body that it cannot trust you.
Mhm.
So I have a real issue with diet culture. I have a
Yeah.
real
I
issue
do
with
too.
anything around that too, because
Yeah.
it's not based on the proper science of nutrition for your body.
Yeah. I completely 100% agree with you on that. I feel like the word diet is very toxic. I
Hmm.
believe that, yeah, people go on these, like the old way of thinking, let's go on a diet and like, limit the amount of calories and this and that. And then they are like, okay, I'm finishing my diet. And then they just do the same thing all over again. And then it's like a very vicious cycle. And I just believe that I completely agree with you. Honestly, at the end of the day, it's all about the nutrition and what you're feeding your
Hmm.
body. It's not
Hmm.
about limiting the amount of calories. And it is very, traumatizing to your body if you decide,
Hmm.
oh, let me just not like eat as much anymore. And then it's just confused. And then
Hmm.
like that's like super unhealthy. And then, and also like, I don't believe in diets. I believe in a nice, healthy lifestyle. Because when you have a healthy lifestyle and don't eat like all this like processed like food and trans fat and such, like then your body is gonna like if lose like, how can I explain this? Your body is going to give you what you want if
Hmm.
you take that route. And it's more better long term than doing a hardcore diet and then reaching that goal and then stopping the diet. And then it just comes back and people are wondering like, oh, why did I gain the weight again? It's because
Right.
you're not being consistent. You're just
Hmm.
following this bullshit of a diet that is not teaching you any discipline or how to properly eat. And then
Right.
so like that's like it's so toxic where it's like every like new year, oh, I'm gonna lose weight, I'm gonna go on this diet. Like it's like shut up. Like I'm getting very
Hmm.
passionate right now. And honestly, it's like I completely 100% agree with you. And like I mean, I'm very big on like nutrition and like eating healthy because I mean, I've had like not I haven't had an eating disorder, but I've had a lot of like issues with like my stomach and just like, certain things like that, for example,
Hmm.
and I would get sick very easily and such. So I do everything that I can in my power to stay healthy, when
Hmm.
I'm having access to those organic foods and, making easy choices and spending a little bit more money. Like for I know a lot of people spend spend less money and they get like the highly processed food versus like spending an extra like couple of dollars, for example, to get the organic. I rather spend the extra couple of dollars and get the organic than save the $2 and get like the stuff that has all these like chemicals and words I can't even pronounce. You know what I mean?
Here's the cool thing is
Yeah.
that with being in eating disorder recovery and learning
Mhm.
how to eat balanced, I can eat whatever I want.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can't have.
Yeah.
Pizza used to be what they call a fear food for me because
Okay.
once I went into recovery, I was deathly afraid if I ate pizza, I was going to gain weight. Well,
Yeah.
that's one of the
Mhm.
purposes of recovery, first of all. But
Yeah.
I had to get past that.
Hmm.
So, and what I've learned, and I eat pizza without thinking about it now. And there
Yeah.
was a long day where I was like, I wish I could do that. Um,
Yeah.
but what I've learned is that two servings of pizza, two slices of pizza, is a normal serving. And
Hmm.
pizza is actually one of the healthiest things you can eat. It's
I
got
heard
the
that. Yeah.
carbs, it's got the fats, it's got the protein. You've got the
Yeah.
protein in the cheese, you've got the protein in your meat, whatever meat you put on it.
Right.
You've got the carbs the carbs and the fat in the crust and in
Hmm.
the cheese. So it really is pizza is a balanced meal.
It is, yeah.
I just had it Friday. You
Yeah,
know,
I
it
don't have
really
pizza
is
tonight. Now
balanced.
you
But
inspired me.
yeah, here's the other thing, and this is just something in the last month or so that I've gone through, is that I noticed I went to the doctor, and I used to have two scales in the house, and one
Mhm.
day, it was gotten to the point I was checking my weight a number of times a day, and I told my dietitian, she's like, bring the scales next time. I want your scales. And I almost didn't bring them. And I told her that. She said, Sue, if you hadn't had them, I would have said, then we're not having a session. Don't come back until you bring them.
Mhm.
But because I had to break that bond to them,
Mhm.
and now I don't think about my weight. I never thought I would. But
Yeah.
but here's the thing. So when I go to the doctor though, they weigh you. And I'm to the point now. Some people can't, aren't to this point, and that's fine. For me, I'm to the point, I'm kind of curious. Just, I know I feel fine. I feel strong. I feel solid. That was
Mhm.
one change, is that I felt solid instead of hollow as I started to
Mhm.
eat.
Mhm.
My clothes is fine. Every person, their body has what they call a set weight. And we don't know
Yeah.
what it is, but it's the natural setting where, based on your biology and your DNA and your bone structure, where your
Mhm.
body is at its optimum point where it can be healthy for you, carry your weight, support your joints, and let you do what you want it to do, where your body
Yeah.
will take care of you because you have taken care of it. So
Exactly.
if you had if you had told me a while ago my set weight is where it is, I would have laughed you off the face of the earth, because I didn't. There's no way. So anyway, about, I don't know, when I went to the doctor earlier this year, like, it was, more than what it normally was. And I'm intentionally not saying numbers. And you and I talked before the show
Yeah.
that I will. There are two things I will not discuss, and those are my ranges of weight,
Mhm.
because that is triggering. Numbers can be
Yeah.
triggering, and I will
Mhm.
not be part of triggering anybody. But
Exactly.
what I can say though, is that it was more than what it had been a year ago, and I'm like, that can't be right. And I'm like, no, I'm protesting and everything. So I'm like, oh, I've talked to my dietitian, my counselor about it, and my dietitian said, we were talking about, about it, and she said, I'm not opposed to you, you know checking somewhere else, because when I saw her in person, she would, check me, check the weight and everything, to make sure it was stable. um
Mhm.
but we always did it blind. I never knew what it was. So anyway, so we ended up, Sam's Club had something, so I went there and everything, and it ended up being the same amount. I was like, okay, well, maybe there's something to this. So I talked through my dietitian and everybody, and my counselor, because I was a little freak. I wasn't freaking out, but I was just like, not sure I'm liking this. But
Mhm.
I don't feel any heavier. Well, I had just been through PT for my knee. So what
Mhm.
we decided, and my dietitian quickly said, was, well, Sue, here, I'm not concerned about it, because you say you feel healthy. You look fine every time I see you. There's no other changes or anything. She's like, and you just did PT, and I think you put on muscle weight.
Yeah.
And muscle weight is more dense than fat,
Mhm.
but it doesn't, it weighs more, but it doesn't take up as much space as fat. So I gained the weight because I put on muscle. And
Mhm.
that took a little bit to wrap around my head. And what was
Mhm.
funny is that when I was at my checkup for my doctor, she's checking my weight, and she's like, and I could tell, to my dietitian later, I started laughing. I said, so I'm talking to my dietitian about it, at my doctor appointment, and the doctor's kind of, looking at it, and she's kind of, I can tell she's scratching her head. I was laughing about it with my dietitian, my counselor. I said, I could tell she was, in her mind, she was starting to think BMI. And I said, I was thinking, don't even go there, because I don't want to have to school you. So, and my dietitian, my counselor just start laughing. They're like, yes, please, no, because BMI is not an indicator of health.
Oh yeah.
Body mass index is not an indicator of health, because it doesn't take into consideration what you and I were just talking about. It
Yeah.
does not take into
100%.
consideration muscle mass.
Mhm. Yeah, because we were talking about nutrition and neutralizing your body and such, which is like
Hmm.
different from like weight. Because I mean, you're right, like you can have a certain weight, but like it cannot be like fat. It can be like muscle, and like people like when they have muscle, that puts on weight, and it's like it's healthy. So I totally, get where you're coming from there. So, all right, Sue. So I'm gonna be closing off on this conversation that we're having. And one last thing I always like to ask my guests is a piece of advice that you like to provide my listeners here based off of everything that we spoke about today.
Yeah, I'm a master certified life coach, which means I get to help people take their next step,
Yes.
to see their dreams become reality, for them to start seeing that there is hope. I said earlier, I want to be a voice of hope for others.
Hmm.
Yeah, I speak. My book won an award, so I'm an award-winning
That's
author.
awesome. That's
Yeah, so it's
cool.
having said all that about having said all that, my message to others is the message of my book, and
Hmm.
it's simply twofold. It's okay. It's not to be okay. It's okay to not be okay, because we try to make people think that we have it all together.
Hmm.
And honestly, every person walking across the face of the earth is broken and hurting in some way. And
Yeah.
it's time to stop playing the game, because when we try to make someone else believe we're someone we're not, we're
Hmm.
really trying to convince ourselves. And when we
Yeah.
lie to ourselves, we become disingenuous. So that's the first thing, is it's okay to not be okay. The other
Yeah.
half is this other message. And it's simply that you only have to be a step ahead to help the person behind you. My
Hmm.
business name is My Step Ahead. Everything I do is under that, because that's what I'm about. As a voice of hope, is to help people realize they only need to be a step ahead. You don't have to have it all figured out to be helpful to somebody else. You don't
Exactly.
have to have it all figured out before you feel like you can make a difference. You make a difference simply by sharing with somebody else your story, as it relates to something they're going through, because you then become a voice of hope to them.
Yeah.
That's what I'm about. That's what My Step Ahead is about. That's what
Hmm.
my book is about. And if there's something that I can do to help any of your listeners, I give a 15-minute free consultation for life coaching or for speaking. So if
Hmm.
you're in need of a speaker, be it virtual or in person,
Hmm.
if you're thinking maybe life coaching may help you,
Yeah.
I'd be thrilled to speak with you. You
Hmm.
can go to my website, which is suebowles.com. It's
Hmm.
SUEBOWLES.com. And Justine will have it in the show notes. There's a
Hmm.
form right there. Just fill that out. I will be in touch with you. We'll set up a phone call and see how I can help you take your next step.
Perfect. I love that. And also for the listeners, she does also want to promote that book as well. By the way, I just ordered it.
Thanks.
Excited to read it. It is called This Much I Know, The Space Between. So I'll leave that link. I bought it off Amazon. I love Amazon. Amazon's great. But yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed this conversation. I felt it had so much value. And Sue, thanks so much again for being on this. I really do appreciate, the knowledge that you provided here on this episode.
I appreciate your time, Justine, and I'm always happy to come back again.
All right, perfect. And then from my listeners, stay tuned. I'll be talking about the next episode. But all right, so next week we're going to be talking with my roommate Laura. She's going to talk about how she handles having her dreams almost coming true to it being taken away. It's a very upsetting situation, but she gives us great advice to, keep moving forward. Hope you enjoy.